The sun was beginning to set over the jagged mountains of Kandahar, painting the barren terrain in shades of orange and gray. Commander Reed scanned the rocky horizon through his binoculars, adjusting his position atop a ridge to maintain a vantage point for his SEAL team below. They were on a reconnaissance mission, one meant to gather intelligence on insurgent movements before a planned night assault. But as always, in a war zone, even the simplest operations had a way of unraveling in seconds. The SEALs moved in formation along the narrow valley, their boots crunching against loose stones, rifles at the ready. The air was tense. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every distant noise could herald a threat. Reed's team had been briefed extensively, yet nothing could prepare them for the unpredictability of human ambush. As he scanned the horizon, he noticed unusual dust patterns along a far ridge, slight, almost imperceptible movements. His gut tightened. "Reed, movement at 11 o'clock, whispered Lieutenant Torres, crouched beside him. Reed nodded and gestured for the team to spread out, eyes trained on the ridge. The sun glared harshly off jagged rocks, making it nearly impossible to discern details. The air was silent, except for the distant whistle of wind and the occasional clatter of loose stones. Then, without warning, a hail of gunfire erupted. Automatic fire tore through the canyon, the sharp rattle of bullets shredding the quiet. 2 SEALs went down instantly, screaming as they hit the rocky ground. The rest of the team dove for cover, seeking the natural formations that might provide any protection from the sudden onslaught. Reed pressed himself flat against a boulder, heart racing, eyes fixed on the source of the attack. A heavy machine gun nest had been concealed in a fold of the ridge, and the team had walked directly into its line of fire. Suppressing fire. Covering fire, now. Reed barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. But no suppression seemed enough. The enemy's fire was precise, almost surgical, pinning down his men and leaving them vulnerable. Panic was a luxury they could not afford. Reed scanned the ridge for a way to flank, for anything at all that could turn the tide, but visibility was poor, and the enemy was entrenched. And then it happened. A single piercing shot split the air. Reed's ears rang from the sound, and time seemed to slow. The insurgent operating the machine gun collapsed as though struck by an invisible hand. The weapon clattered to the ground, and the valley fell into a stunned silence. Reed instinctively raised his rifle, scanning the ridge. Who took that shot? He barked into the comms, voice tight with disbelief. But no one answered. The rest of the team looked at each other, stunned. None had fired from that angle. None had even been close enough for such a kill. The shot had come from too far away, too high up, a distance beyond the effective range of their weapons. Reed's mind raced. It had to be impossible, yet there it was, a flawless, near-miraculous elimination of the enemy gunner. Then, movement. A dark silhouette flickered against the dying sunlight atop the distant ridge. The outline of a lone figure, crouched and still, barely visible, manipulating a rifle as if it were an extension of themselves. Reed squinted, heart hammering, certain that his eyes were betraying him. It couldn't be. No human could make a shot like that from such a distance. And yet, there it was. Undeniable proof that someone, somewhere, had just saved their lives. The SEALs fell silent, holding their breath, fear mingled with awe. The sniper remained motionless for a few seconds longer, scanning the valley, before disappearing into the terrain, leaving no trace. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of gunpowder and dust, and for a moment it felt as if the world itself had held its breath. "Everyone okay?" Reed's voice was steady, though adrenaline still coursed through his veins. The team checked each other quickly, assessing injuries. They were shaken, but alive. And though the enemy had momentarily been neutralized, The ridge above remained a mystery, a question mark that would haunt them for weeks. Torres whispered, almost to himself, "Did you see that? Someone's up there? Someone incredible." Reed's jaw tightened. He had seen many things in combat, but nothing like this. The precision, the calm, the sheer audacity of a single shot from impossible distance. It defied explanation. It wasn't just skill. It was mastery. Reed lowered his rifle, scanning the ridge one last time. He knew that the battle wasn't over. The insurgents would regroup, reinforcements would come. But for now, there was one undeniable fact. Someone had saved their lives, and that someone was watching, hidden in plain sight, above them all. Back at the base later that evening, the footage from helmet cams was reviewed. Slow-motion captures barely showed the silhouette on the ridge, a fleeting shadow at the edge of the frame. Yet everyone who saw it knew what had happened, a shot that had turned potential death into survival. Reed replayed the scene over and over, studying the angle, the timing, the impossible trajectory. "Who is that?" he asked quietly, almost to himself, his fingers tapping the edge of the console. No one could answer. The intel logs listed only a support sniper assigned temporarily, a vague mention of a joint operations specialist. Reed frowned. He had no record of this person in his operational history. The thought chilled him and stirred a strange curiosity. Someone had acted without orders, without recognition, and had saved an entire SEAL team from annihilation. Reed's mind replayed the moment again and again. That single shot had done more than neutralize a threat. It had shattered his understanding of what was possible in combat. The sniper on the ridge was no ordinary soldier. Whoever it was, they had altered the course of an operation, changed the fate of men trained to face death daily, and disappeared into shadows before anyone could thank them. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Reed remained at the console, staring at the grainy image, realizing a truth that would stay with him forever. Some warriors did not seek glory, did not wait for recognition. They moved unseen, precise, lethal, and protective, acting only when necessary. And tonight, one such warrior had watched over them from a distant ridge, ensuring that the SEALs lived to fight another day. Reed leaned back, exhaling slowly, his mind already racing ahead. He had questions, urgent, pressing questions, but he knew the first step was simple. Find the shooter. Whoever she was, Reed had seen her skill firsthand. And one thing was certain. He would not forget the ridge, the shot, or the silent figure who had changed everything. The sun had barely risen over Kandahar when Commander Reed returned to the base's command center. His mind was still replaying the impossible shot from the previous day. The footage on the monitors showed only a fleeting silhouette atop a distant ridge, barely discernible, yet the effects had been undeniable. One bullet had changed the fate of his entire SEAL team. The thought alone made him uneasy. Someone had operated beyond the boundaries of the operation, unseen and unaccounted for. Who was this sniper? And why hadn't he been informed of their presence? Reed strode past rows of busy analysts and intelligence officers, his boots clanging against the metal floor. His eyes scanned the latest satellite recon images and the mission logs, hoping for some clue. A junior intelligence officer, barely out of basic training, approached him nervously. "Commander Reed." "The sniper," she stammered. "Her records. They're classified. Limited visibility only. She's listed as a support sniper, attached temporarily for Overwatch." Reed frowned, his jaw tightening. "Support sniper? Temporary? Why was I never informed?" The officer shrugged, her hands trembling slightly as she gestured at the computer screen. "I don't know, sir. The order came down from Joint Special Operations Command. It was last minute. They didn't brief your team directly. Her designation is, well, unusual." Reed studied the designation, Sergeant Alexandra Hall. The name meant nothing to him. He had never heard of her, had never trained with her, and yet she had demonstrated a skill level that defied comprehension. Reed had seen elite snipers in combat, men who had earned reputations across multiple theaters, marksmen capable of extraordinary feats. But this was different. This was something almost otherworldly. He leaned in closer, scrutinizing her personnel file. But it was a wall of blacked-out sections. Dates, operations, qualifications, all redacted. Only fragments remained. Advanced long-range ballistics training, Arctic field survival, psychological operations, and a handful of declassified commendations with no context. Reed rubbed his temple. How does someone with this much skill just appear out of nowhere? He muttered. A colleague, Lieutenant Torres, joined him at the console. I saw the footage, sir, Torres said quietly. She wasn't just accurate, she was methodical, calculating wind, trajectory, elevation. That shot wasn't luck. It was perfect. Too perfect, Reed replied. And we weren't supposed to know she existed. This isn't standard protocol. His mind raced through the possibilities. Rogue agent? Covert CIA operative? Special classified program? None of it fit neatly into the operations he knew. And yet, the undeniable fact remained. She had saved his men. Reed's curiosity quickly morphed into obsession. He spent the next several hours cross-referencing old mission reports, looking for patterns that might match Hale's style. Every operation he checked, Mosul, Fallujah, Helmand, had accounts of inexplicable shots taken from extreme distances by someone whose identity was never confirmed. Every report contained the same eerie note. The shooter appeared suddenly, altered the course of events, then vanished without a trace. Reed's pulse quickened as he realized a pattern. The nickname Spectre kept appearing in unofficial accounts, whispered among SEALs and intelligence circles. Rumors suggested a lone sniper capable of incredible feats, appearing only when the situation seemed hopeless. Reed's mind went back to the ridge, the silhouette against the setting sun, the calm efficiency, the almost preternatural precision. Could it be? Could Alexandra Halle be this so-called Spectre? The more he investigated, the more questions surfaced. Hale's file was minimal, her personal history obscured, and her operational details were almost entirely classified. Even top-ranking officers seemed hesitant to speak about her, as if acknowledging her presence might somehow alter the narrative of the missions she had participated in. Reed felt the weight of a story he wasn't meant to know, a soldier who existed on the fringe of official records, yet whose impact could not be denied. Hours passed. Reed's thoughts oscillated between disbelief and awe. He knew he needed answers, yet the answers were carefully guarded. I need to meet her, he said finally, almost aloud. Face to face. I need to understand who we're dealing with. Torres placed a hand on his shoulder. Commander, you realize she may not want to meet you. She doesn't answer to anyone here, at least not in the traditional sense. Reed exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't care. I need to know who saved my team. That shot, it wasn't just lucky. It was deliberate, calculated. Someone made a choice to protect us. His mind drifted back to the ridge, to the precise moment the bullet struck its target. He could still hear the echo, still feel the weight of disbelief that had settled over him when he realized none of his team had fired it. Whoever she was, Halle had been watching, calculating, and acting when it mattered most. Late that evening, Reed found himself alone in the command center, reviewing the footage again. Every frame seemed insignificant on its own, but when played back in slow motion, the perfection of her timing became apparent. The way she adjusted for wind, the slight tremor in her gloved hands, every movement showed control, discipline, and experience far beyond standard expectations. Reed's respect grew into something deeper, admiration tempered by unease. He had never seen anyone operate like this, not even in training simulations. And then there was the humanity, or perhaps the lack of it, in her approach. She had not hesitated. She had not faltered. She had observed, calculated, and acted with lethal precision, ensuring that none of Reed's men were injured further. It was not bravado. It was responsibility, delivered with detached efficiency. Reed realized that this was not a soldier who sought recognition or medals. She existed to do her job, flawlessly, invisibly, and without question. The next morning, Reed requested a briefing with the Support Sniper Command. The officer who arrived was tight-lipped. "Sergeant Hale is available for debriefing," he said, his tone formal, almost cautious. "But she is on her own terms. You will not question her past or operational methods. She will speak only about the mission at hand." Reed nodded. He understood. Whatever mysteries surrounded Hale, the Ridge had already proven her skill beyond doubt. As he left the command center and walked toward the staging area, Reed couldn't shake the image of the silhouette against the sunset. The memory was vivid. A single figure, calm, composed, lethal, and unseen. He knew, without question, that this encounter would change him, not just as a commander, but as a soldier who had witnessed something extraordinary. He was about to meet someone who didn't belong to any unit, any roster, or any record, yet whose presence would haunt him and inspire him for the rest of his career. The SEALs moved out for a routine morning exercise, but Reed lingered, studying the terrain around the ridge. The thought lingered in his mind. His sniper had saved lives, but why? Who chose to appear, act, and disappear without a trace? And what else was this so-called Spectre capable of? He had questions, urgent, pressing questions, but he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. Sergeant Alexandra Hale was no ordinary soldier. And the moment he met her, he would see firsthand why no one questioned her. The sun rose higher, illuminating the jagged peaks and casting long shadows across the valley. Reed felt a strange mix of anticipation and apprehension. He didn't yet know the full story of the unknown sniper who had turned the tide in Kandahar, but he knew it was only a matter of time before he would. And when that time came, he hoped he would be ready. Because what he had witnessed on that ridge, a single shot that stopped time itself, was only the beginning of a story far greater than any of them could have imagined. The following day, Commander Reed returned to the command center before sunrise, coffee cooling beside him, eyes already scanning the monitors. The memory of the ridge, the impossible shot, and the lone figure of the sniper refused to leave his mind. Hale's presence, or rather, her absence in official records, gnawed at him like a phantom. Who was she? How could someone of that caliber exist outside his operational awareness? The more Reed investigated, the more his obsession grew. Every minute he spent poring over the fragmented files, the more apparent it became. Sergeant Alexandra Hale was not simply a sniper. She was a phenomenon. Her personnel file was unlike any Reed had ever encountered. Every standard section, training, deployments, commendations, evaluations, was heavily redacted. Some pages had nothing but blacked-out rectangles. Others contained brief phrases like advanced ballistic operations or classified Arctic deployment, confidential. Even the dates of assignments were obscured, leaving only tantalizing hints of her past achievements. Reed's instincts screamed that she had operated in missions so secret that not even high-ranking SEALs could access the details. Yet fragments of information were enough to paint a picture. Hale had been trained in extreme environments. Mountain ridges in the Pacific Northwest, Arctic tundras where the cold could freeze fingers within minutes, deserts where the wind played tricks with trajectory calculations. She had undergone advanced sniper school, psychological operations, Survival training far beyond standard infantry expectations. Reed noted her previous operational postings, though partially redacted, included locations consistent with high-value counter-terrorism missions. Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and even areas classified as Black Ops. "Commander, you're staring at it again," Lieutenant Torres said, breaking Reed from his trance. He hadn't realized how long he'd been studying the shadowy lines on the screen. Reed gestured vaguely. "This isn't normal. No sniper, no operative, should have this level of secrecy and still appear in our operational theater without proper coordination." Torres frowned. "Do you think she's rogue?" Reed shook his head. "No, she's effective, controlled, calculated. Rogue implies chaos. Halle is the opposite of chaos. Look at the ridge. One shot, precise, perfect, controlled, lethal, invisible." Hours passed as Reed combed through old mission logs, comparing unknown snipers' accounts and distant shots credited to unidentified operatives. Every operation listed reports of untraceable bullets, insurgent deaths from impossible ranges, and moments where embattled teams were suddenly saved by unseen shooters. In nearly every report, the term Spectre appeared, a whispered nickname, among operators who had never confirmed her identity, but knew of her presence. Reed's pulse quickened as he reviewed these logs. Could Halle be the legendary Spectre? Each description matched the sniper he had seen on the ridge. Precise, detached, capable of extraordinary calculations under extreme pressure. In several operations, Spectre had changed outcomes single-handedly, appearing when all hope seemed lost, and then disappearing, leaving only the aftermath, the dead, and a team that had survived against impossible odds. It wasn't just her skill that fascinated Reed. It was her detachment. Every action Halle took seemed deliberate and emotionless, yet profoundly protective. She didn't intervene for recognition, for glory, or even for the thrill of combat. She intervened because she had to, because the lives of others depended on it. Reed realized, with an unsettling clarity, that this sniper operated according to her own code of ethics, invisible to the bureaucracy, and answerable only to a mission's success. Unable to resist, Reed attempted to access classified files beyond his clearance. Every attempt was blocked. Security protocols flashed warnings in red. Access denied top-secret nitrogen monoxide clearance. Frustration surged through him. He had seen her in action, relied on her lethal skill, yet official channels treated her as if she did not exist. The disconnect unnerved him. Who had sanctioned her presence on the ridge? And why keep her hidden from the team she saved? Then he noticed something odd. A single line of declassified text buried deep in the file. Specialized target interdiction and Overwatch deployment. Operational discretion maintained at all times. It was vague, almost meaningless on the surface, yet Reed read it differently. She wasn't assigned to them. She had been deployed with discretion, able to intervene wherever she deemed necessary. She wasn't there by order. She was there by choice. And that choice had just saved his team from certain death. Reed's obsession grew. He spent the rest of the day cross-referencing her known skills with environmental conditions, ballistics, and combat scenarios. Every impossible shot, every mission saved, every ghostly intervention could be explained by her training. Wind calculations, humidity, altitude, the curvature of the earth. Halle seemed to account for it all instinctively. The more Reed studied, the more he understood that she wasn't just highly trained. She was almost beyond human expectation. He recalled the ridge, the glint of her scope in the dying sunlight, the calm, deliberate adjustments, the ease with which she neutralized a threat that should have decimated his team. That moment, he realized, wasn't luck. It was years of experience distilled into a single action, executed flawlessly under pressure. Every SEAL he had trained with would have struggled. Yet she made it look effortless. Late that night, Reed found himself alone in the operations tent, staring at the faint silhouette on his monitor. The image was grainy, almost abstract, but he could see the elegance in her posture, the precision in her movements. It occurred to him that she had likely been watching them for hours before taking the shot. Not as a bystander, not as a random protector, but as someone who had anticipated the ambush, calculated the odds, and intervened exactly when necessary. Reed knew then that this wasn't a mere operative performing her duty. Halle was something else entirely, a force operating on the edge of visibility, untethered from protocol, capable of altering the course of combat with a single bullet. She existed outside normal rules, a shadow within the machinery of war. And he realized, with a mix of fear and awe, that he wanted to meet her, to understand her, yet he feared the experience might be overwhelming. The following morning, Reed received the word he had been waiting for. Sergeant Halle would be attending the next joint operations briefing. She was scheduled to be present during a debrief on the Valley operation, though she would speak only when ready. Reed felt a surge of anticipation and apprehension. For weeks, he had pieced together fragments, rumors, and speculation. Soon, he would meet the sniper who had rewritten the rules of engagement in real time. He spent the next hours preparing, reviewing mission reports, coordinating with his SEAL team, and rehearsing the questions he intended to ask. He wasn't just meeting a skilled shooter. He was meeting someone whose reputation, spectral, untouchable, almost mythical, preceded her. The legend of Spectre was about to step into the room. As the sun rose over Kandahar, Reed felt a strange mixture of excitement and dread. He had seen the impossible shot, experienced its consequences, and now understood that he had glimpsed a soldier who transcended ordinary combat limitations. Sergeant Alexandra Halle was no ordinary operative. She was a phenomenon, and the coming encounter would either answer his questions or deepen the enigma that already consumed him. Reed took a deep breath, studying the monitors one last time. The silhouette on the ridge haunted him still, a figure half shadow, half myth, whose presence had changed the course of his team's mission. Whoever Halle was, he realized, she operated under her own rules. And one thing was certain. After meeting her, nothing about warfare, strategy, or precision would ever feel the same again. The Joint Operations Briefing Room was unusually quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Reed had endured just days before. The walls, lined with maps and monitors displaying real-time tactical data, seemed sterile, yet charged with anticipation. Commander Reed stood at the edge of the room, fingers lightly tapping the tabletop. His mind replayed the ridge, the impossible shot, and the fleeting silhouette of a sniper who had saved his men from certain death. Today, he was going to meet her. The unknown, the Spectre, the one who had rewritten reality for his team, Sergeant Alexandra Halle, would step through that door. The door opened with a quiet click, almost understated, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Reed's first impression was striking. Halle moved with a measured grace, every step deliberate. She was neither flashy nor imposing, yet her presence commanded attention. She wore the standard combat fatigues of the support sniper unit. But there was something different about her posture, an unspoken confidence, a precision in movement honed by countless hours of discipline and training. Reed noticed her gloves were worn, her rifle sling adjusted perfectly across her shoulder, and a faint scar traced the line of her jaw. The SEALs present instinctively straightened, hands hovering near weapons, though no threat existed. They had trained for every conceivable scenario, yet Hale's calm composure unsettled them. She wasn't aggressive or threatening. She was simply unshakable. Reed's instincts, honed over decades, told him this was not someone to underestimate. Reed stepped forward, extending a hand in the formal gesture of greeting. "Sergeant Halle," he said, his voice steady, though his mind raced. "You're the one from the ridge." Hale's eyes, steel gray and sharp, met his. For a moment, there was nothing. No expression, no hesitation, only observation. Then, ever so slightly, she inclined her head. "I was covering your team," she said. Her voice was quiet, precise, controlled, but carried an underlying weight, a subtle authority that made it clear she expected no arguments. Reed studied her, searching for signs of ego, of pride, of human frailty. He found none. There was a quiet intensity in Hall, a combination of focus and detachment that separated her from everyone else in the room. She didn't need to speak loudly. The very act of her presence conveyed competence, calm, and lethal efficiency. The briefing began, but Reed found it difficult to focus. He kept glancing at Holly, noting every movement, the way her eyes scanned the maps, the slight shift of her weight as she adjusted to the light, the careful placement of her hands on the table. Every gesture conveyed someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions with minimal margin for error. And yet, there was no arrogance, no need for validation. She existed entirely within the mission's parameters, nothing more, nothing less. Reed's curiosity grew unbearable. When a lull appeared in the briefing, he leaned forward. "Sergeant, that shot on the ridge. It was extraordinary. I need to know how you did it." Hale's gaze met his, unflinching. "I don't miss," she said simply. No explanation, no flourish, just a statement of fact. Reed felt a chill. Her words were not boastful. They were a description of reality. He understood then that trying to quantify her skill with conventional metrics would be pointless. Her mastery exceeded what even the most experienced SEALs could achieve. Torres, observing the exchange, whispered under his breath, "She's different." Reed nodded subtly. Yes, she was different. Every fiber of her being indicated someone who had spent a lifetime perfecting precision, control, and anticipation. She wasn't a soldier in the traditional sense. She was a force, a shadow capable of altering events from a distance. The room returned to briefing mode, but Reed's mind remained on Hall. He recalled the ridge, the way she had appeared suddenly, calculated every movement, and neutralized the enemy without hesitation. No hesitation, no doubt, no fear. Just precision. He realized that she had likely been monitoring their movements for hours before deciding to take the shot, and every calculation she made had saved lives. After the briefing, Reed requested a private conversation. Halle didn't resist. She followed him into a small side room, maps and intel screens fading into the background. Reed gestured for her to sit, though she remained standing, as if the position suited her better. He studied her silently for a moment, trying to gauge the person behind the sniper. "I need to understand you," Reed began. "Who are you? Why weren't you in the operation plan? And why risk yourself to save us?" Hale's gaze held his. "I observe. I calculate. I act when necessary. That is my role. I'm not here for recognition, Commander. I'm here to ensure the living return home." Her words were deliberate, almost clinical, yet imbued with a quiet conviction. Reed realized she was describing her life, her mission, and her philosophy in the same sentence, detached yet deeply principled. Reed nodded slowly. "And Spectre, that's you?" Halle didn't flinch. "I don't need a name. It's irrelevant." The nickname matched everything Reed had been piecing together. Spectre was not a persona. It was a description of her operational method. Unseen, effective, lethal, protective. Reed felt both awe and relief. He had wondered if the legend had been exaggerated, but now he understood. It had been understated. He couldn't help but ask the question that had been burning in his mind. How many times have you saved teams without them knowing it? Hale's eyes softened ever so slightly. More than you'd imagine. Some live. Some don't. My duty is the same regardless. Her tone carried no bitterness or regret, only acceptance. Reed felt the weight of her experience pressing down, realizing she had walked through decades of impossible scenarios, making split-second decisions that had kept others alive while exposing herself to lethal danger. The two stood in silence for a long moment, the room charged with unspoken understanding. Reed could feel the enormity of her presence, someone who existed on the edge of rules, protocol, and visibility, yet whose impact on every mission she touched was undeniable. She was not just a sniper. She was a guardian in the shadows, operating by a code only she fully understood. Finally, Hale spoke, her voice calm but firm. "Commander, I do not ask for trust. I do not ask for understanding. You will see the results of my decisions in time. That is all you need." Reed exhaled, a mixture of relief, admiration, and unease. "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you." Hale tilted her head, almost as if acknowledging the truth of his statement. "Good. That means you're paying attention." As she turned to leave, Reed felt a strange sense of anticipation. Their paths had crossed briefly, but he knew this encounter would change everything, not just for him, but for the teams who had come under her protection. Hale was more than a soldier. She was a phenomenon, precise, disciplined, and invisible until the moment she chose to act. Outside the room, Reed paused and looked back at the empty space she had occupied. The memory of the ridge, of the single shot that saved his men, returned vividly. He realized something crucial. Hale was not just a sniper. She was a force that operated outside the known parameters of war, and the legend of Spectre was entirely real. For the first time, Reed understood the paradox. The most effective warriors are often the ones who remain unseen, unknown, and unacknowledged. Hale's skill, precision, and unyielding dedication had altered the course of events in ways that no standard protocol could account for. And he had seen it firsthand. He returned to the briefing room, mind racing. The SEALs, sensing the shift, looked to him expectantly. He didn't need to explain. The presence of Sergeant Hale, the quiet force, the ghost sniper, had already conveyed everything. Reed's only thought as he walked back to his team was this: the ridge had produced something extraordinary, and he was privileged to witness it. Outside, the wind carried dust and sand across the valley. Reed stared toward the distant ridge where Hale had first appeared. The silhouette was gone, but the impression remained. A single shot, a single life saved, a single force operating in the shadows, unrelenting, unseen, and unstoppable. Reed knew this encounter was just the beginning. The early morning air in Kandahar carried the sharp scent of dust and anticipation. Commander Reed's team assembled quietly, each SEAL checking equipment with practiced precision. Today's mission was critical: infiltrate a canyon network that housed a high-value insurgent leader, a man whose intelligence could unravel weeks of coordinated attacks on allied forces. The terrain was brutal: steep cliffs, narrow passes, and little cover from enemy observation. And to make matters worse, the operation was slated for a nighttime insertion, under minimal visibility, and against forces who knew the terrain intimately. Sergeant Hale was positioned on an elevated ridge overlooking the canyon entrance, the perfect vantage point for overwatch. Her rifle, an M82 Barrett .50 caliber, rested calmly against her shoulder as she scanned the valley below. Through her scope, every ridge, every fold, every shadow was a potential threat. She did not speak unnecessarily. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Her focus, her calm, and her precision spoke volumes. The SEALs had come to rely on her silently, though none truly knew the full extent of her skill. Reed crouched near the canyon entrance, signaling his team to move forward. "Keep it tight," he whispered. "Stay low. Eyes on the exits." The team advanced, boots barely making a sound on the loose gravel. The insurgent network they were about to breach had proven resilient in past operations, and intelligence suggested they were armed with multiple automated positions and snipers of their own. Every step was measured, deliberate, and dangerous. As the team entered the first canyon bend, Hale's voice cut through the comms, calm, unwavering, precise. "Wind is shifting northwest. 32 degrees. Targets at 1,050 meters, partially obscured. Wait for my mark." Reed felt a chill. Her calm command contrasted sharply with the adrenaline coursing through his own veins. She was no ordinary sniper. She was calculating, anticipating, controlling variables in a way that even the most seasoned operators could barely comprehend. Minutes passed like hours as the SEALs moved deeper into the canyon. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from a ridge to their left. An insurgent squad had spotted their movement and opened fire, forcing the SEALs to dive for cover. Reed cursed under his breath, recognizing the sound of an ambush, a well-coordinated one, clearly designed to isolate and overwhelm. "Targets neutralized in 3 seconds," Holly whispered over comms. Before anyone could respond, precise gunfire erupted from the ridge above. One by one, enemy combatants fell, each shot perfectly timed, eliminating threats without endangering Reed's team. His jaw tightened in disbelief. "Unreal," he muttered. "She's taking them out without exposing herself." The ambush escalated. Bullets ricocheted against canyon walls, dust clouds rising in deadly swirls. Reed realized that the insurgents were attempting to cut off their escape route, forcing the SEALs into a kill zone. Panic could have set in, but Hale's instructions over the comms were methodical and precise. "Move left. Cover your angles. I have visual on the ridge 3 o'clock. Hold fire until my mark." Seconds later, Holly fired again. A single precise shot that eliminated the enemy spotter directing fire on Reed's team. The sniper on the ridge had saved them once more, and yet this time she had drawn attention. The insurgents began scanning the ridge, spotting the faint outline of her position against the fading dawn light. "Commander," Torres hissed, "they see her. She's exposed." Reed's mind raced. They couldn't leave her there, not with enemy forces converging. But Hale's calm voice overrode his instincts. "Extraction point Delta, 5 clicks east. Covering fire incoming. Move now." Reed led his men along her instructed path, moving as swiftly and silently as possible. Hale's fire continued to suppress the enemy, eliminating targets with surgical precision. Each shot was deliberate, each movement calculated. Even under pressure, she remained composed, a lethal specter shielding the SEALs from almost certain death. Halfway through the canyon, the SEALs were caught in another crossfire. Reed could see the enemy closing in from both flanks. "We're cut off," he shouted into the comms. "Not yet," Hale's voice replied, calm as ever. She calculated wind, distance, elevation, and target movement in seconds. A pair of enemy snipers peeked from behind boulders. Before they could fire, Hale's rounds found their mark. Another group attempted to flank the SEALs from the eastern ridge. One precise shot each, and they collapsed into the dust. Reed felt a mixture of awe and unease. Every action Hawley took was flawless, yet she was now in clear danger. The insurgents were relentless, adapting to her position. It was only a matter of time before they located her fully. Reed's gut twisted. She had saved them, yes, but she had also become a target, alone on the ridge, outnumbered, and exposed. "Commander, we can't leave her," Torres said urgently. Reed made a split-second decision. We move up the ridge, now. He signaled his team to pivot, climbing the rugged terrain toward Hale's position. The ascent was perilous. Every step was dangerous, every movement visible to enemy forces. Explosions erupted below, dust and debris showering the rocky canyon walls. Yet Reed's focus remained singular. Hale had saved his team, and now it was his turn to ensure she survived. Hale's fire continued as they approached, holding back the enemy with remarkable accuracy. She eliminated each approaching threat with efficiency and precision, conserving ammunition and never revealing panic. Her composure in the face of mounting danger was extraordinary, yet Reed noted the small signs of strain, a flicker of sweat, a slight tightening of her jaw. She was human, but only just. By the time Reed and his team reached the ridge, Hale had fought a small army alone. Spent shell casings littered the ground, her rifle scope slightly scuffed from debris. She was kneeling, sidearm drawn, breathing steady but heavy. The sight of her made Reed's respect deepen. She had held the line alone, calculated, efficient, unstoppable. "You held them off," Reed said, almost in disbelief. "I don't like being interrupted," Hale replied, her voice calm, almost teasing despite the danger. The faint smirk revealed a touch of her personality. She was lethal, yes, but she was also fully aware of the impression she left on those who witnessed her skill firsthand. Reed quickly assessed the situation. The insurgents were regrouping below. Extraction would be difficult without further casualties. Hale motioned to the team. "Covering fire first. Move to my coordinates and extract. Stay low, coordinated. Trust the timing." The SEALs followed her instructions precisely, moving with flawless coordination under her guidance. Reed realized that she was not just a sniper. She was a commander from a distance, orchestrating survival and victory with surgical precision. Each shot she fired created opportunity and safety, her presence a shield invisible to the enemy, yet palpable to her team. As they reached the extraction point, the SEALs were exhausted but alive. Reed finally allowed himself a moment to look at Hal directly. She was bleeding slightly from a superficial wound, her clothing dust-streaked and torn, yet her expression remained controlled, almost serene. Her rifle rested lightly across her shoulder, as though it were a natural extension of herself rather than a weapon. "Thank you," Reed said, though the words felt inadequate. Hale's eyes met his, acknowledging the gratitude without acknowledgement of the danger she had faced. "I do what needs to be done," she replied simply. No embellishment, no theatrics, only the truth. Reed felt the weight of her philosophy settle on him. She existed not for recognition, but for the mission, for the protection of those who could not protect themselves. As the extraction helicopter lifted them from the canyon, Reed looked back at the ridge. Hale's fire had saved them all. The ridge, the bullets, the timing, everything had aligned perfectly because of her skill, discipline, and intuition. And yet, the legend of Spectre was more than skill. It was presence, perception, and precision that bordered on the supernatural. For Reed, the moment crystallized into clarity. Hale was no ordinary operative. She had saved lives, changed the outcome of the operation, and remained calm under pressure that would break most seasoned soldiers. Her presence, unseen, invisible, and utterly lethal, had once again demonstrated why she was a force beyond comprehension. And though the SEALs were alive, the battle was not yet over. Hale's ridge had been compromised. The enemy would adapt. Reed understood that this mission, known internally as Red Dusk, had tested not only skill and courage, but strategy, coordination, and instinct. And Hale had proven, beyond any doubt, that she was not just a sniper. She was the guardian in the shadows, the unseen hand that ensured the living survived. As the helicopter disappeared into the horizon, Reed silently vowed to learn more about her, to understand her methods. and to ensure that her skill and courage were recognized. If not publicly, then at least by those who had been saved. The first phase of Operation Red Dusk was over, but the legend of the Spectre, and the SEALs who witnessed it firsthand, had only just begun. The calm after the extraction was short-lived. Reed's team had barely set foot back at the forward operating base when intelligence reports came through. Insurgents had regrouped and were moving to retaliate against anyone involved in Operation Red Dusk. Their numbers were larger than expected, better coordinated, and they had likely identified the ridge from which Hale had delivered her lethal shots. Reed knew instinctively that the next attack would be ruthless, precise, and unrelenting. Hale, though seemingly calm, studied the incoming intel with intensity. Every report she analyzed, every map she scrutinized, carried weight. She didn't speak unnecessarily, yet her presence exuded authority. Reed watched as she traced insurgent movements with a gloved finger, calculating approaches, firing lines, and potential ambush points with near telepathic precision. "They're adapting," she finally said. "They've studied the ridge. Expect counter-snipers and traps. High probability of indirect fire at dawn. We need a plan." Reed nodded. "Agreed. Torres, assemble the team. Hale, we'll need your guidance on Overwatch positions. We can't let them get the drop on us." Hale simply inclined her head. No question. No hesitation. The plan was simple but dangerous. Move into the canyon network once more. Anticipate the enemy's ambush and neutralize threats before they could strike. Hale would oversee from an elevated position, coordinating strikes and offering long-range fire support. Reed's heart sank slightly. She had saved them once, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. And the enemy would adapt. The night was darker than usual, with low-hanging clouds obscuring the moon and reducing visibility to mere meters. Reed's team advanced cautiously, boots barely making a sound on loose gravel. Hale's voice came through the comms, calm and measured. Wind at 15 knots, slight drift northwest. Elevation difference, 120 meters. Enemy positions marked. Proceed carefully. Minutes later, gunfire erupted. This time, the enemy had anticipated their moves, sending squads along both flanks of the canyon. The SEALs dove for cover as bullets shattered rock around them. Reed's heart pounded, adrenaline spiking, as he realized the ambush was worse than anticipated. Hale's shots rang out, deadly and precise. 2 enemy snipers, attempting to pin down Reed's team, were eliminated before they could fire. A machine gun nest on the canyon ridge was destroyed with a single well-placed round. Hale's presence was like a phantom guardian, invisible yet profoundly effective. But this time, the enemy had learned. Explosions rocked the canyon as improvised charges detonated nearby, forcing the SEALs to take cover behind jagged boulders. Reed realized the insurgents weren't just trying to kill them. They were attempting to channel the team into a kill zone where even Hale's fire might not reach them in time. "Commander, multiple targets approaching the eastern ridge," Torres shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Reed swore under his breath. They were being funneled into a trap. Hale's calm voice cut through the chaos. "Move left. Maintain spacing. Trust the rhythm. I've got their elevation angles. Cover your blind spots." Reed marveled at her composure. Even under intense fire, Hale remained analytical, precise, and unflappable. She moved her scope smoothly, calculating trajectory, wind, and distance with surgical precision. One by one, insurgents fell to her bullets, eliminated silently and efficiently. Every shot she fired was deliberate, conserving ammunition while maximizing effect. Despite her skill, the insurgents began to adapt again, using smoke, terrain, and decoys to mislead her calculations. Reed's team was forced to push forward, moving through treacherous terrain while Hale covered them from above. One SEAL, Private Jenkins, stumbled, exposing himself to enemy fire. Without hesitation, Hale neutralized a sniper targeting Jenkins, saving his life in an instant. Reed's jaw tightened. The sniper's awareness was not just skill. It was near superhuman perception. Hours into the firefight, Hale realized the enemy had planted explosives along their escape route. She calculated the timing and distances in her mind, adjusting her fire and communicating precise coordinates to Reed. Step left, 3 paces. Explosives ahead. Move fast, maintain cover. I'll suppress the ridge. The SEALs followed her instructions perfectly, weaving through narrow passages while bullets ricocheted off rock walls. Hale's cover fire was relentless, each shot taking down threats before they could fire. Yet Reed noticed something subtle. She was tiring. The strain of continuous calculation, focus, and firing was beginning to show in her posture and breathing. Still, she remained composed, masking her fatigue behind an aura of calm control. At a particularly treacherous bend, Reed saw a group of insurgents attempting to flank them from above. He signaled for a counterattack, but Hale intervened. Wait, hold, let them cluster. My next shots will take 3 of them out simultaneously. Timing is key. Reed hesitated, then trusted her judgment. Moments later, 3 insurgents were down, their attack thwarted before it began. Reed's respect deepened further. Hale's capacity to calculate and act under pressure was unlike anything he had ever seen. As the SEALs reached a narrow ridge suitable for extraction, Hale continued to provide overwatch, spotting hidden threats and eliminating them before they could interfere. Reed felt a mix of awe and unease. She had saved his team twice now, but each victory came at a cost: exposure, risk, and exhaustion. And yet, she never complained, never hesitated. Her focus was total, her commitment absolute. Suddenly, a sniper fired from a distant ridge, striking near Hale's position. She twisted instinctively, returning fire with deadly accuracy, neutralizing the threat. Reed realized the enemy had learned to track her. She was now a target, in addition to being their savior. He signaled the team to provide covering fire, moving to reinforce her position. Hale's eyes remained unflinching, scanning the terrain for threats, calculating distances, and prioritizing targets. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, and efficient. She eliminated another enemy sniper, then repositioned slightly, maintaining cover while keeping the team safe. Reed understood the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Hale's skill was not just shooting. It was battlefield orchestration, situational awareness, and instinct operating at the highest human level. As the extraction helicopter approached, Hale's calm guidance ensured the SEALs moved into position without further casualties. Reed felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Her actions had saved lives repeatedly, demonstrated mastery under pressure, and prevented the enemy from exploiting the terrain. And yet, Hale remained silent, almost detached, as if the mission's outcome was the only measure of success. Once aboard the helicopter, Reed finally allowed himself to speak. "Sergeant Hale, you were incredible, beyond what I've ever seen. Twice today, you saved us all." Hale's eyes met his, calm and unwavering. "I do what's necessary. That's all that matters." Her tone carried no arrogance, no ego, only resolute professionalism. Reed realized she was not a soldier seeking glory. She was a guardian operating in the shadows, prioritizing life and mission above all else. As they lifted off the ridge, leaving the canyon and the ambush behind, Reed took one last look at the terrain below. The dust and smoke settled slowly, revealing the aftermath. Enemy forces decimated, his team intact, and one invisible savior still standing watch over them. Hawley had once again altered the course of events, executing precise, calculated, and near-superhuman interventions under extreme pressure. Reed knew the story of Operation Red Dusk would be told for months within intelligence circles. Yet he also knew the true hero, Hawley, would remain largely unseen, unrecognized outside the SEALs she saved. And that was precisely how she wanted it. She did not act for accolades or recognition. She acted because she was capable, because she was precise, because the lives of others depended on her unwavering skill. As the helicopter disappeared into the early morning sky, Reed silently acknowledged the truth. Sergeant Alexandra Hawley was not just a sniper. She was a phenomenon, a force of nature operating with lethal precision, unseen until the exact moment she chose to intervene. And for the SEALs who had witnessed her in action, she was nothing short of a guardian angel in combat, a shadow who ensured that the living survived to fight another day. The helicopter touched down at the forward operating base, just as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon. The dust and debris from Operation Red Dusk still lingered in the air, settling on fatigues, weapons, and the faces of exhausted SEALs. Commander Reed stepped onto the tarmac, letting the tension drain slowly from his shoulders, though his mind remained sharp, replaying every detail of the canyon fight. Hawley was already disembarking, rifle slung across her back, calm, collected, almost eerily so given the chaos she had orchestrated and survived. Reed watched her as she moved through the base, noting the efficiency of her steps, the slight wear in her expression, and the subtle, deliberate way she carried herself. She did not speak to anyone unnecessarily. She didn't acknowledge accolades, questions, or admiration. She existed within the mission, yet outside it, a paradox that both fascinated and unsettled him. The team gathered in a debriefing tent, seated around folding tables strewn with maps, radios, and weapons. The tension was still palpable. Adrenaline had not yet fully ebbed. Reed took a deep breath and addressed the team. "Everyone, report? Status?" Each SEAL recounted the mission meticulously. Casualties, 0. Enemy neutralized, multiple squads. Extraction, clean. Yet even with flawless execution, Reed noticed the undercurrent of disbelief in the team's voices, not at themselves, but at the sniper who had turned the tide. Hale's interventions had saved every life in the canyon, yet the SEALs could only speculate on the skill, the calculation, and the composure that had made it possible. Finally, Reed addressed the elephant in the room. "Sergeant Hawley, we owe our lives to your cover and precision. I need to know, how did you do it?" Hale's gray eyes met his, unwavering, calm, and unreadable. "I observed. I calculated. I acted when necessary. That's all." Her response, so simple and matter-of-fact, hung in the air like a shadow. The team remained silent, absorbing the gravity of her words. It was clear that for Hawley, the mission's success was reward enough. Recognition, medals, accolades, these were irrelevant to her. She existed in the realm of the unseen, the unacknowledged, yet profoundly effective. Reed felt a mix of admiration and unease. He had seen her in action twice now, on the ridge during the initial ambush, and again during the catastrophic counterattack, and each time, she had displayed skill, judgment, and composure beyond comprehension. Yet there was more than skill at play. There was a philosophy, a discipline, a commitment to life and duty that operated beyond conventional understanding. Hale's presence was both a gift and a reminder of human potential. After the formal debrief, Reed walked with her to a quiet corner of the base. Dust clung to their boots, the air still charged with the remnants of combat. "Sergeant," he began carefully, "I need to understand you. You've saved us twice, executed impossible shots, and yet you remain. A ghost. Who are you, really?" Hale's gaze shifted slightly, considering him, but her expression remained unreadable. "I am who I need to be for the mission," she said quietly. "Names, accolades, history, they don't matter. Only the result matters." Reed shook his head slowly, a mixture of frustration and awe. "But people need to know. They need to understand the impact you've had. You've saved lives, altered the outcome of operations. You don't just exist in the shadows. You shape the battlefield." Halle tilted her head. "I am not interested in shaping history. I am interested in preserving life and ensuring success. That is enough." Reed realized then that arguing with her was pointless. Hale's philosophy was immutable. The mission and the living came first, recognition last. And in that clarity, he found a measure of respect unlike anything he had encountered. Over the next few days, the base settled into a rhythm of reflection, maintenance, and minor operations. Reed spent his hours analyzing mission footage, comparing trajectories, and reviewing Hale's tactical decisions. Each analysis only deepened his understanding of her skill. She had considered wind direction, humidity, trajectory, target movement, and potential counteractions in seconds, under life-threatening conditions. Every shot had been precise, calculated, and deliberate. He also noticed subtler details: Hale's patience, her observation, her ability to anticipate human behavior under extreme stress. She was not only a sniper. She was a master of situational psychology, reading threats and teammates alike, acting with preternatural awareness. The more he studied, the more he understood that her skill extended beyond bullets and rifles. She wielded influence through perception, control, and timing. Yet there were human costs. Reed noticed the subtle fatigue, the tension in her shoulders, and the faint scarring on her hands and face, evidence of countless missions, countless exposures to danger. Halle carried the weight of her work silently, stoically, and without complaint. Reed realized that her efficiency and composure came at a personal cost that none of his team could fully measure. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant ridges, Reed and Halle walked together along the base perimeter. The air was quiet, filled with the soft hum of generators and distant conversations. Reed broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what comes next? After a mission, after all of this?" Hale's eyes remained forward, fixed on the horizon. "Every mission has a next step. Survival, extraction, readiness. That is all." Her words were calm, deliberate, almost unfeeling. Yet Reed sensed an undercurrent of depth, a life spent in constant readiness, judgment, and sacrifice. He paused, considering her carefully. "You've given your team life more than once. You've acted in moments that would break most people. Don't you feel the weight of it?" Hale's gaze finally met his. "I feel responsibility, Commander. Not weight. The burden is yours if you fail to act, not mine. I act because I must, not because I can. That is the difference." Reed swallowed, understanding that Hale's philosophy was both alien and profoundly logical. She had lived in extremes, survival, calculation, and lethal efficiency, and had emerged unflinching. The burden of her choices was accepted, internalized, and executed with precision, without hesitation. In the days that followed, Reed observed his team recovering. They spoke quietly among themselves of the sniper who had saved them, the ghostly presence that had changed the battle's outcome. Some speculated on her past, her training, her experiences, yet all agreed on one truth. She was extraordinary, almost superhuman in capability, calm, and efficiency. And yet, she remained elusive, distant, and untouchable, the specter they had only glimpsed in action. Reed, too, reflected. He understood that Hale's impact extended far beyond the battlefield. She challenged assumptions about skill, leadership, and human capacity. She operated beyond protocol, recognition, and expectation, yet her influence was undeniable. Her presence had reshaped his understanding of operational dynamics, team cohesion, and tactical execution. Finally, as the base prepared for the next rotation, Reed approached Hale once more. "Sergeant, I need to know something. You've saved lives, changed outcomes, and yet you disappear into shadows. Why?" Hale regarded him quietly, expression calm, voice unwavering. "Because the mission is never about me, Commander. It is about those who must live to fight another day. That is all that matters. Recognition is irrelevant." Reed nodded slowly. He had no words to argue, no logic to counter her philosophy. Hale's presence had taught him a lesson that went beyond tactics, strategy, or leadership. The most extraordinary warriors are often those who remain unseen, who act without expectation, and who carry responsibility without seeking reward. As he watched her walk away, Reed felt a mix of awe, respect, and unease. The Spectre had proven herself again, a force unseen, a guardian in the shadows, a sniper whose precision, judgment, and philosophy defied conventional understanding. He knew, with certainty, that Hale would continue to shape outcomes, save lives, and operate beyond recognition. And he realized that for those who had witnessed her, the legend of the Spectre was not myth, it was reality. The ridge where she had first appeared, the canyon where she had saved them, and the missions yet to come were all connected by one constant: Sergeant Alexandra Hall. Calm, lethal, unseen, and unstoppable. A phenomenon that would linger in memory long after the battles ended. The days following Operation Red Dusk were tense, but intelligence indicated that the insurgent leader had escaped the previous battle and was regrouping in a fortified compound several kilometers from the SEALs base. Commander Reed knew that this would be the final opportunity to capture or neutralize the target. This was no ordinary raid. It was a high-stakes, precision mission, and failure could cost dozens of lives. Hale would play a central role once more, and Reed could not afford to underestimate her or the enemy. The mission briefing was meticulous. Every possible variable was examined, every risk assessed. The compound was heavily guarded, with multiple sniper positions, automated defenses, and a network of tunnels and high walls. Intelligence suggested the target moved unpredictably, often appearing only briefly in open areas before retreating inside the heavily fortified structure. Hale listened in silence, analyzing the terrain on her tablet, her finger tracing calculated paths, sight lines, and vantage points. Reed studied her closely. She did not speak unnecessarily, but her eyes, sharp, calculating, and unblinking, took in every detail. It was as though she could see the entire battlefield before it existed, predicting movements and outcomes with unerring precision. He knew that the success of this mission rested not just on the team's execution, but on her skill, her judgment, and her unflinching accuracy. The insertion took place at dawn. Helicopters hovered low, kicking up dust and debris as the SEALs moved toward the compound. Hale took position on a ridge overlooking the target, her rifle resting lightly against her shoulder. Every movement she made was deliberate, calculated, and precise. Reed could feel the tension coiling in the air like a spring ready to snap. As the team approached the compound's perimeter, insurgents opened fire from multiple directions. Bullets shredded the air, ricocheting off walls and rocks. The SEALs ducked for cover, returning fire while moving methodically toward the objective. Hale's shots rang out like clockwork, eliminating threats before they could strike. Each target fell silently, efficiently, and with perfect timing. Her fire covered the team, giving them the opportunity to advance without casualties. Reed watched her operate, awestruck. She was no longer just a sniper. She was a master tactician, orchestrating survival and victory with every calculated move. Yet he noticed subtle signs of strain, a tightened jaw, a flicker of fatigue in her eyes, evidence that even someone of her extraordinary skill could feel the pressure of life and death. As the team breached the compound, the enemy leader appeared briefly in an open courtyard, surrounded by armed guards. Hale's eyes locked on the target instantly. Reed could see the calculation in her gaze. Wind, distance, trajectory, movement, probability of obstruction. The moment required perfect timing. One mistake, one fraction of a second, and the target would vanish or retaliate. "Commander," Hale whispered over comms. "Calm but precise. Target visible. Distance, 1,347 meters. Exposure, 3 seconds. Hold until my mark." Reed's pulse quickened. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. The SEALs froze in position, trusting Hale implicitly. She was a shadow in the distance, unseen but overwhelmingly present. The air seemed to hold its breath as Hale adjusted her scope, calculating for every variable. 3 seconds passed like an eternity. Then, in a motion that seemed impossibly fluid, Hale fired. The sniper shot traveled with deadly precision, striking the insurgent leader before he could react. Guards fell in disarray, chaos erupting in the courtyard. The SEALs surged forward, securing the compound with minimal resistance. Reed felt an overwhelming mixture of relief, awe, and disbelief. Hale had done the impossible, a single shot that ended the mission before the enemy could respond. The precision, timing, and calculation were beyond human comprehension. For a moment, Reed could barely breathe, staring at the ridge where she had fired from. Hale's presence, calm and collected, was a stark contrast to the chaos below. After the compound was secured and intelligence assets confirmed the target neutralized, Reed finally approached Hall. The adrenaline had not yet fully faded, and his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "Sergeant Hale, you've done it again. Beyond any measure, beyond any expectation. How do you do it?" Hale met his gaze, unwavering, calm, and unreadable. "I calculate. I act when necessary. That is all. Mission first. Lives saved. Recognition irrelevant." Reed shook his head slowly, a mixture of frustration and awe. "Irrelevant? You just changed the course of this entire operation. You've saved dozens, maybe hundreds, and yet you speak as though it was nothing." Hale inclined her head slightly. "It is not nothing. But it is not about me. The mission, the living, the team, that is all that matters." Reed realized then that Hale's philosophy was unshakable. She existed not for glory, not for recognition, but for duty, precision, and the preservation of life. Every calculation, every shot, every decision was guided by that philosophy. And yet, her humanity, visible in the faint signs of fatigue, the brief flickers of emotion, reminded him that she carried the weight of her actions silently, stoically, and alone. The team gathered to debrief and celebrate the success of the mission. Even in the midst of triumph, there was a quiet reverence when Hale was mentioned. No one spoke loudly, no one gushed praise, yet the respect was palpable. They understood the truth. The operation had succeeded because of her skill, her judgment, and her unflinching presence in the shadows. Reed finally found a moment alone with Hall, away from the cameras, radios, and chaos. He studied her carefully. "Sergeant, you've done more than any of us could have imagined. And yet, you remain distant, almost untouchable. Don't you ever want acknowledgement, recognition, or even a moment to rest?" Hale's gray eyes met his, calm, deliberate, and unwavering. "Acknowledgement is irrelevant. Rest is earned in the quiet moments between missions. What matters is that the living survive and the mission succeeds. That is enough." Reed nodded slowly, understanding the magnitude of her philosophy. Hale had lived her life in extremes, calculation, precision, survival, and had emerged as something almost superhuman. A guardian in the shadows whose actions reshaped the battlefield and preserved life in ways few could comprehend. As the sun set over the base, Reed watched Hollow from a distance. The ridge, the canyon, the compound, each had been the stage for her unmatched skill and calm precision. She had operated unseen, decisive, and lethal, and yet her presence had profoundly impacted everyone who had witnessed it. She was no ordinary sniper. She was a phenomenon, a shadow, a force operating beyond expectation. Reed understood something fundamental. The legend of Spectre, once whispered, once doubted, was real. Halle was that legend, and she had proven it in ways that words could scarcely describe. She existed in the margins of battle, unseen, unacknowledged, yet profoundly effective. And for those who had survived her intervention, she was nothing short of a guardian angel, calm, lethal, and unstoppable. Finally, Halle turned away, moving toward the perimeter of the base, her rifle resting lightly on her shoulder. Dust and fatigue visible, yet her composure absolute. Reed watched silently, knowing that this was not the end. Halle would continue to operate in shadows, saving lives, altering outcomes, and reminding all who crossed her path of the extraordinary potential that exists in silence, precision, and unwavering duty. And as she disappeared into the fading light, one thought crystallized in Reed's mind. The world would never fully know the extent of her actions. But for those who had lived to fight another day, Sergeant Alexandra Hall, the Spectre, would forever be remembered as the unseen force that shaped history with a single, decisive shot.